It started with a gavel bang. The House chamber was tense, thick with the kind of stillness that only happens before something explodes. The issue, a $5 billion emergency relief package. The stakes, millions of Americans on the line. And seated at the center of it all was House Speaker Mike Johnson, flanked by stiff-faced allies, ready to dig in. Representative Jasmine Crockett, dressed sharp in royal blue, rose slowly. Her expression was unreadable. But behind her silence, the nation could already sense something was coming. Johnson leaned into the microphone. This bill is a reckless overreach. It's loaded with pork, buried in politics, and absent of accountability. Crockett didn't blink. He went on, we cannot, in good conscience, throw away $5 billion while Americans, but that's when she stepped forward. Mr. Speaker, she interrupted, her voice calm but razor-edged, let me stop you right there. The chamber fell silent. Even C-SPAN viewers at home leaned in. You speak of accountability, she said, locking eyes with him. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the $1.7 billion that vanished from oversight last quarter under your leadership. Let's talk about how rural hospitals are closing while your donors' stock portfolios are booming. Johnson shifted in his chair, clearly not expecting fire this early. And Jasmine was just warming up. The tension in the room snapped like a taut wire. Mike Johnson narrowed his eyes. That's a gross mischaracterization. Jasmine didn't flinch. Is it? She shot back, stepping closer to the podium. Because last I checked, the GAO report didn't lie. Page 17, Section 3, shows funds rerouted from community housing into untraceable administrative disbursements. Want me to read it out loud for the public record? Gasps echoed through the gallery. Even seasoned members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Johnson tried to gather himself. This is not the forum for a personal attack. We're here to debate the merits of, no, we're here, Crockett cut in, voice sharp, because people are hurting, and leadership is failing. What's personal is when a mother in Baton Rouge has to ration insulin because this chamber can't agree on funding. What's personal is when your party spends more time dissecting headlines than fixing roads, clean water, or veteran care. Reporters' fingers flew across keyboards. This wasn't just a debate, it was a political reckoning, live on national TV. Jasmine turned toward her colleagues. This isn't a clash about dollars. It's a battle for priorities. And if we're choosing between billionaires and broken communities, I know where I stand. She turned back to Johnson. Do you? He didn't answer. But his silence said everything. The room crackled with energy now, every breath held, every camera rolling. Mike Johnson leaned forward, gripping the sides of his lectern. Representative Crockett, if you're implying I don't care about struggling Americans, that's not just unfair, it's beneath this chamber. Jasmine arched an eyebrow. What's beneath this chamber, she replied, is pretending empathy while blocking every measure that would prove it. She raised a thick folder into the air, paper-clipped and marked in red tabs. This, she said firmly, is the breakdown of the $5 billion bill. Page by page. Every dollar tracked. Emergency housing, disaster relief, mental health clinics in redline districts. You claim it's bloated? Show us where. Johnson hesitated. She pressed harder. No, really. Point to the waist. Pick a page. He didn't move. You can't, she said, voice low but cutting. Because the real issue here isn't the funding, it's the face of the one defending it. That line hit like a hammer. Several lawmakers murmured. On the upper level, a CNN anchor could be seen mouthing, did she really just say that? You don't fear reckless spending, Crockett continued, you fear accountability with a mic and a memory. And that's why you're sweating right now. Johnson opened his mouth, but no words came out. A beat. Then Jasmine dropped the folder on his desk with a soft thud. Do your homework, she said, before lecturing the rest of us. The chamber erupted in stunned silence, followed by a slow, rising wave of applause, quiet at first, then louder. She turned and walked back to her seat without another word. And Mike Johnson, still frozen behind his podium, didn't speak again for the rest of the session. The aftermath was instant. Clips of the exchange exploded across every major network within the hour. #Crockett Clash was trending globally by evening. Even late-night hosts paused their monologues to replay her final line, "Do your homework before lecturing the rest of us." Inside the Capitol, staffers scrambled, phones buzzing, aides whispering in corners, strategists pacing back and forth. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just challenged Mike Johnson, she dismantled the entire GOP's talking points on live television. In the Minority Caucus war room, cheers erupted when the footage replayed on loop. One aide laughed, she didn't just clap back, she clapped the whole budget committee into silence. Meanwhile, Johnson's office released a stiff, carefully worded statement about maintaining decorum and restoring fiscal balance. But the damage had already been done. Public confidence in his leadership was plummeting. Editorials flooded in. The Hill, Crockett schools Johnson in real-time budget smackdown, Reuters, bipartisan applause for Crockett's $5 billion defense, unheard of, until now. Fox News, unfiltered grandstanding or brave accountability? You decide. And while Johnson retreated from the spotlight, Jasmine Crockett was just getting started. That evening, she appeared on MSNBC, sitting comfortably across from Rachel Maddow. "You didn't hold back today," Maddow said with a grin. "Was that strategy, or instinct?" Jasmine smiled. "It was survival. If you're not willing to speak up for the people who can't afford lobbyists, then what exactly are you doing in Congress?" Maddow nodded. "And what would you say to Speaker Johnson right now?" Jasmine leaned forward, voice calm but powerful. "Same thing I said on the floor," she replied. "Read the bill, or move aside." While the public praised Jasmine Crockett's brutal precision, inside the speaker's wing, the mood was anything but calm. Mike Johnson slammed the folder Jasmine had left on his desk down on the table in his private office. Papers spilled everywhere. His chief of staff tried to collect them, but Johnson waved him off. "I want her censured," he snapped. "Tomorrow. First thing." "But, sir," the aide hesitated, "public support's not exactly swinging in our favor right now. Even a few Republicans said she made valid points." Johnson's jaw clenched. "She embarrassed me on national television." The aide lowered his voice. "She exposed you. There's a difference." That night, internal party tensions spilled into the open. Several moderate GOP members distanced themselves from Johnson's position, quietly signaling support for the $5 billion package Crockett had defended. In the Democratic camp, Jasmine was being hailed as the rising star they'd needed, direct, unshaken, and armed with facts. Even members of the Progressive Caucus, often wary of the spotlight, called her performance surgical. Back home in her Texas district, crowds gathered outside her office just to cheer when she returned. Dozens held handwritten signs, "Our voice in D.C. Crockett, the people's protector, $5B for us, not them." Inside her office, Jasmine sat at her desk, phone in one hand, unread messages in the hundreds. Her press secretary popped in, smiling. "You've got every Sunday show calling," she said. "And, a producer from 60 Minutes. Jasmine leaned back, exhaled, then smiled. "Tell them all the same thing," she said. "I'm not doing victory laps." She stood, grabbed the same folder she'd dropped on Johnson's desk. "Not until the bill is law." 3 days later, the Capitol was humming with rumors. Mike Johnson hadn't made a public statement since the clash. Every appearance was cancelled. Every question about the $5 billion relief bill was deflected. But inside the backrooms, something had shifted, and Jasmine Crockett knew it. Word came through the grapevine, Johnson's own inner circle was fracturing. A faction of GOP moderates were threatening to join Democrats if a revised version of the bill wasn't passed, soon. That afternoon, in a closed-door session, Jasmine walked into the Budget Committee hearing with quiet confidence. She knew who had called it, Johnson himself. He was already seated, looking grayer than before, eyes heavy with calculation. "Representative Crockett," he greeted, stiffly. "Mr. Speaker," she replied evenly, setting her folder on the table between them like a loaded weapon. "I've reviewed the bill again," Johnson began, unable to meet her eyes. "I'm glad," she said, folding her arms. "Did you find the pork you warned America about?" A pause. "No," he admitted. The room froze. Jasmine leaned in just slightly. "So what's this meeting really about?" Johnson sighed. "You want your bill passed. I want to avoid a full party mutiny. Let's find middle ground." "You mean," she said, "you want cover." He looked up then, exhausted, humbled. "I want solutions." "You win, all right." Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't need to. "Fine," she said. "We tweak 2 clauses for clarity, add real-time audit access to every disbursement. Full transparency." He hesitated. Then nodded. "Deal." By nightfall, the announcement was official, a bipartisan agreement reached. Relief bill moving forward. Crockett and Johnson joint statement scheduled. The news cycle exploded. But behind the headlines, one truth was clear to everyone in D.C., Jasmine Crockett hadn't just won the fight. She changed the game. The press conference podium stood under blinding lights as a sea of reporters waited, cameras aimed, mics stacked. Mike Johnson approached first, stiff as ever. Behind him, Jasmine Crockett strode in with purpose, calm, collected, unmistakably in command of the moment. Even before a word was spoken, the body language said everything. Johnson cleared his throat. "Today, I stand before you not as a politician defending party lines, but as a leader acknowledging reality. After rigorous discussions, I am supporting the emergency relief bill, with amendments that ensure transparency and accountability." Muted claps from the press pool. Then eyes turned to Jasmine. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the air like crystal. "Let me be clear," she began, eyes scanning the room. "This wasn't about pride. It wasn't about party. It was about principle." Cameras flashed like lightning. "For too long, political games have blocked progress," she continued. "But when the cameras turned on, and the lights got bright, some of us remembered who we're here to serve. Not donors. Not egos. People." Reporters scribbled furiously. Some even stopped typing just to listen. "The $5 billion in this bill won't solve everything," she admitted, "but it will save lives. And if that makes some of my colleagues uncomfortable, good." She glanced at Johnson, just briefly. "Uncomfortable is where change begins." There it was. The headline. The quote. The shift. CNN cut away from a panel mid-sentence to go live. MSNBC called it, "the moment that may define the next decade of House leadership." Fox News, flustered, dubbed it, "a surprise alignment of opposites." And by nightfall, every major paper ran a variation of the same headline, "Jasmine Crockett forces a breakthrough, and makes the speaker blink." She didn't linger after the conference. No celebratory dinners. No red carpets. Just her, walking calmly into the evening, already planning the next battle. While Capitol Hill buzzed with analysts and rewrites of political strategy, the real impact hit the country like a wave. In Flint, Michigan, where water relief had stalled for years, activists cheered as word spread, $400 million in emergency infrastructure upgrades were greenlit. In rural Louisiana, where hospitals had shuttered, doctors received confirmation of funding for 2 new clinics. On native lands in Arizona, leaders celebrated grants for mental health and addiction recovery centers, finally. The money was moving. And everyone knew why. It wasn't just because the bill passed. It was who had fought for it, publicly, unapologetically, and with facts in hand. On TikTok, a viral video of Jasmine Crockett's floor speech reached 42 million views in 24 hours. A teenager stitched it with the caption, "She said what all of us been screaming." College students quoted her in protest signs. Teachers used the debate as a case study in civics classes. Even Republican-leaning towns couldn't deny it. Jasmine Crockett hadn't embarrassed Mike Johnson, she'd exposed the cracks in a system people were tired of defending. Back in Washington, Johnson's grip on his own party weakened. One by one, moderates began asking hard questions, about priorities, leadership, and why it took a public dressing down for progress to happen. Meanwhile, Crockett kept her head down. No national interviews. No self-congratulatory tweets. When asked by a local reporter if she felt victorious, she simply said, "Victory isn't a headline. It's seeing a kid in West Dallas drink clean water without worrying if it'll poison her. Until then, I'm not finished." The mic didn't drop. It was placed carefully back on the stand. And the nation, for once, stayed quiet, not out of shock this time, but out of respect. As Jasmine Crockett returned to regular committee work, something unexpected began stirring, not in the press, but in private rooms across D.C. Senators whispered it behind closed doors. Political operatives sent quiet feelers to her team. A few donors, new, powerful, and diverse, began circling. "Have you thought about a Senate run?" one strategist asked her over coffee. She gave a half smile. "I've thought about people eating. I've thought about emergency rooms. I haven't thought about new titles." But the whispers didn't stop. Cable pundits speculated nightly, is Crockett the new face of a rising progressive wave? Is the Democratic leadership preparing to hand her the reins sooner than expected? And one headline from The Atlantic caught fire, the $5 billion moment that launched a movement. Meanwhile, Mike Johnson was losing ground fast. Members of his own caucus began holding their own press conferences, distancing themselves from fiscal rigidity and grandstanding theatrics. Internally, a no-confidence discussion began circling among House conservatives. One Republican even told Politico off the record, "That Crockett moment. That was a before and after line in this place. She changed how people argue. And how they lose." Through it all, Jasmine kept working, visiting storm-battered communities in Alabama, speaking quietly at a school funding meeting in Ohio, walking into town halls packed shoulder to shoulder, greeted like a folk hero. In one such town hall, a woman in her 70s grabbed the mic and asked, "Will you run for president?" Laughter echoed through the gym. Jasmine paused, smiled, and said, "Let's make sure Congress runs right before we talk about the rest." The crowd erupted. But outside, her aides exchanged a glance. They knew something was building. And this wasn't the end. By the time the $5 billion bill officially became law, signed under national spotlight with bipartisan hands present, Jasmine Crockett was already halfway across the country. No press. No fanfare. Just her, seated in a folding chair at a newly reopened community center in rural Mississippi. She shook hands with nurses, hugged children, and listened to a single mom explain how the relief funds had saved her from losing everything. "You didn't just speak for us," the woman said softly. "You heard us." Back in Washington, the political terrain had shifted permanently. Mike Johnson, weakened by the confrontation and its fallout, quietly announced he would not seek another term as Speaker. The announcement came buried in a Friday news cycle, but the timing didn't fool anyone. His tenure had been defined not by leadership, but by a single televised reckoning. A reckoning named Jasmine Crockett. As new legislation poured in, on housing, disaster response, small business recovery, lawmakers began drafting bills with something new in mind. They'd better be airtight, because if Crockett saw through them, she'd say so. Loudly. Within 6 months, she was tapped to co-chair the House Oversight and Reform Committee. Within a year, a PAC bearing her name, People First Forward, was one of the most influential voices in grassroots legislation. And in every speech she gave, no matter how large the crowd or bright the lights, she repeated the same line: I didn't come to DC to play politics. I came to get things done. Loud if I have to. Sharp if I must. But always for the people. She never claimed victory over Mike Johnson. She didn't need to. Because the moment she stood up, folder in hand, and dared the Speaker of the House to open his mouth without facts, America had already decided, this wasn't just a win. This was a warning. And Jasmine Crockett was just getting started. 2 weeks after the bill passed and the media frenzy settled, Jasmine Crockett received an envelope, hand-delivered, no digital trace, no formal letterhead. Inside, a brief, typed message. We believe your leadership transcends districts. Let's talk national strategy. Confidential meeting. RSVP required. No signature. Just coordinates, a time, and a line at the bottom: the future doesn't wait. Her chief of staff read it twice. This is either a trap, she muttered, or the beginning of something massive. Jasmine stared at the paper, expression unreadable. Then she folded it once, slipped it into her jacket, and said, I'll go. But I'm not going alone. The meeting took place in a private room beneath the Library of Congress, off the record, no press, no leaks. Inside were 7 individuals, a retired senator, 2 major fundraisers, a civil rights attorney, a former Obama strategist, a tech mogul, and a speechwriter known for crafting State of the Union addresses. They didn't waste time. We don't want you to just pass bills, one said. We want you to build something lasting. Another added, what you did with Johnson, you didn't just make a point. You broke a mold. America's listening. Then came the ask. Run in 2028. Not just for Senate. We mean, higher. Jasmine sat silent. She looked around the room, full of influence, power, ambition. Then she smiled, just slightly. If I ever run for something bigger, she said, it won't be because power whispered. It'll be because people roared. She stood to leave. But I'll keep your card. And with that, she walked out. Behind her, the room remained still. They knew what that meant. She wasn't saying no. She was saying, not yet. Months passed. The $5 billion victory became more than a headline, it became a blueprint. City councils cited it. Governors referenced it. Activists printed Jasmine Crockett's floor speech on posters and flyers. And then, something unexpected happened. People started showing up, not just to her town halls, but to DC. They came in buses from Detroit, from Tulsa, from El Paso and Birmingham. Working moms, teachers, union workers, medics, people who'd never set foot in the Capitol before. They weren't there to protest. They were there to watch. To witness. To remind the lawmakers in that building that representation means presence. And no one embodied that more than Jasmine Crockett. In her office, staffers stood by the window, watching as a crowd of nearly 10,000 gathered quietly outside the Capitol steps. A young aide turned to Jasmine and whispered, "They're not here for a rally." "No," Jasmine replied, adjusting her blazer. "They're here to see if we keep showing up for them. I don't intend to fail that test." That afternoon, she took the steps, not for a speech, not for a victory lap, but to stand among the crowd. No microphones. No stage. Just her, shoulder to shoulder with the people who now believed change was not only possible, but already underway. Phones went up. Chants rose. And someone in the back yelled, "Crockett 2028. The crowd echoed it, louder. She didn't respond, didn't smile, didn't wave. But she did raise her hand, palm open, steady in the air. And the crowd grew silent again. "Remember this moment," she said quietly. "Because this isn't about me. This is about you finally being seen. And with that, Jasmine Crockett walked back toward the Capitol, not for power, not for press, but because the door was open now. And she had no intention of letting it close again.